My name is Kirk Dunn, and this is the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. I'm an actor, writer, and knitter, and I'm also known as the Knitting Pilgrim. I earned that title because in 2003, I was awarded an Ontario Arts Council Chalmers grant to knit stitched glass, an installation of 3 large panels designed in the style of stained glass windows, which look at the commonalities and the conflicts between the 3 Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They took me 15 years to knit. And when the project was complete, my wife Claire and I wrote a play called The Knitting Pilgrim about my experience knitting stitch glass and my research into interfaith relations. One thing that wasn't covered in the play was the meaning behind the imagery in the knitted panels. So this series explores each section in conversation because ultimately the project is about having conversations with empathy and curiosity about how we understand and sometimes misunderstand each other. Welcome to the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. Welcome to the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. Today we're going to be talking about the Islamic window or panel. And just as a recap, inside each, or rather for each panel, I have used the structure of the dominant symbol of that faith. So for Islam, we've got the crescent and the star. And inside that symbol, I've placed the images that evoke positive aspects of the faith, whereas then the images that are outside the symbols bring to mind more the challenging issues and questions dealing with the faith and how they relate to one another and to the world. So for today, we're going to look at a section that's inside the crescent. It's on the left side. It's just below the halfway mark, I think, and it evokes the tremendous contribution that Muslims have made to science as scholars, engineers, and mathematicians. And if you take a look at some of the images there, you can see a winged figure, and that is a representation of a gentleman named Abbas ibn Firnas, who apparently experimented with flight in the year 875. And that was in Cordoba, Spain. And just to give you some context, that was about 600 years before Leonardo da Vinci and about a millennium before the Wright brothers. And then in the bottom left of this section, you can see an astrolabe, and that is a navigational instrument that was perfected by Islamic astronomers. And it opened up exploration and trade routes around the globe. And then in the background, we've got a geometric pattern of whirling stars, and that is a reminder of the Islamic contribution to mathematics and geometry. For example, we use Arabic numerals, and we use algebra and algorithms. All those things are Islamic contributions. And to talk about these Muslim contributions to science, both historic and modern, we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. David Liepert. Dr. Liepert is a physician, a scientist, a theologian, and a Muslim community leader. He is the author of 2 books, Choosing Faith. It's currently in its 3rd reprinting in Saudi Arabia by the International Islamic Publishing House, and Muslim, Christian, and Jew, Finding a Path to Peace Our Faiths Can Share, which is published by Faith of Life Publishing here in Canada. He is also wrapping up work on his 3rd book, Different, Together, Forever. He's been a contributing columnist for the HuffPost and was the host of the podcast The Optimistic Muslim. Dr. Liepert is a co-founder of Calgary's award-winning Interfaith Council, where he learned that hospitality is our world's shared sacrament. And maybe that's because, in his words, when you share a meal, you sometimes have to stop talking and listen to others while you chew. He is currently Professor of Interfaith, Multi-Faith, and Post-Faith Relations at the Canadian Centre for Dean Studies in Toronto, Ontario. Dr. Liepert, welcome to the Knitting Pilgrim Talks.
It's a pleasure to be joining you on these talks. Kirk, as I've told you, I'm really, really impressed with your approach to interfaith dialogue, because a picture is worth a thousand words. You have dozens of pictures, so you have an entire textbook uh, in just the pictures that you have. But people are allowed to write the story themselves, and they put it in their own context. And so it becomes non-prescriptive, and it becomes eye-opening, and I it's it's a brilliant way of bringing insight to how much we have together, and also provoking dialogue about all of the things that perhaps unnecessarily keep us apart.
That is very kind of you to say. Thank you very much. And let's springboard from that and have a dialogue about. There's something that we in modern Western world, we tend to think of many Islamic countries as backwards, and we're the ones who are technologically advanced and they're catching up. But there was a period when exactly the opposite was true. And so I wonder if you can maybe share with us what was it about Islam that encouraged those scientific and mathematical advances during that golden age where they were between the 8th and 14th century. What about Islam made people think in those open and expansive ways?
I have to ask you a question first. Did you know the importance of the number 19 in Islam when you chose 19 panels for your window?
I did not.
Because that kind of leads us into this entire understanding of how we got to where we were and how we've gotten to where we are now. Because it's just there's actually the number 19 is an indication of divine sanctification, which is like it's there's an ayat in the Quran that says very clearly overall is 19.
Okay, and
And
an ayat is what is an
a
ayat for
verse. And,
a
and
verse?
it's just each verse is considered to be a miracle. And
Okay,
so that miracle reveals that the number 19 is basically a number of completion in Islam. And if you look at the Quran, like it was very obvious at the beginnings of Islam that the number of chapters was divisible by 19. The number of words in Arabic is divisible by 19. As people were able to computerize and digitize the Quran and the concepts, it's been discovered that the entire book is written in base 19 math. That everything in the Quran, every concept, every word, every Arab letter is actually there a multiple of 19 times, which is basically it's a proofing method. It's God's own proofing method to confirm that nothing in the book has been changed. And it's a brilliant technique. And as people have gotten into it and done the math and the computerization, it's been one of the miracles of the Holy Quran. And it was a mathematical miracle. Like it's there. It's not disclosed in a fashion that is obvious. It's put out there for people to discover for themselves, and this is a recurring theme in the Quran. The Quran, as it was originally revealed, keeps on telling people, look at this, look at that, look at the stars, look at the sky, look at the seasons, look at each other, see all of the truths that are revealed to you about God and your universe and your place in it in the Holy Quran. And so it created this incredible openness to exploration and discovery that really did drive Islam for about 600 years. What you were referring to as the golden age of Islam, as Muslims were spreading and expanding and creating an incredibly inclusive culture. It's like a lot of it that Ibn Firnas, the guy who flew in Cordoba, it just Andalusia was considered by a lot of people the highest point that Islam ever achieved, and it was a place where it's like everybody was free to think, everybody was free to practice their religion, everybody was free to explore, everybody was free to reason, because in fact the Quran told people to do all of those things, and the Quran told people that we all have different paths, but God has put us on our paths, and we're there to explore it. And that was what really drove, like Ibn Firnas. It's just, I'd never heard of that man. And it's just, so of course, we're having this talk. I Googled him. He actually flew. Like he probably had the first glider. And apparently he flew for enough time. When the Wright brothers flew with their powered craft, they had to fly for a minute. He apparently flew from a parapet all the way back to the parapet, and when he landed, because he didn't have a tail, he hurt his tailbone. It just, and so there's a lot of obvious truth to that story. Like people were laughing at him for the fact that he didn't give himself a tail; he just gave himself feathers. So it's just, that's probably a true story, and it's just there are so many things like that in the beginnings of the Islamic exploration of this incredible world that God gave us to live in.
So that's fascinating, because what I hear you saying is that the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad were both telling people to look at things, to explore, to ask questions, to find answers, to be open to other possibilities, and to move forward. And yet, when we think of, and this is not just with Islam, when we think of a lot of religions now, just because of the way the kind of press religions get, which is usually the extreme views in religion make the headlines. A lot of that is about, don't look for answers. All the answers are here already. Stop asking questions. Go back to really simple ideas. So, can you see that as part of what is happening in Islam right now?
Oh, it's frankly, it's a problem in every organized religion, and it's really obvious how much of a problem it is in Islam. And for instance, my comments about the fact that the Quran is written in base 19 math, it's like, that's an incredible miracle, right? You would think that would be something that was being trumpeted from the rooftops, but then the people who originally discovered that then started questioning the theology and the dogma and the doctrine of other Muslims who didn't have exactly their perspectives and their views. And to be honest, the 19 people, they are wonderful people, but the Muslim religion includes billions of people, and those billions of people are incredibly diverse. Like, every one of us probably believes a few things that maybe nobody else in the world believes. This is probably true of every single religion. But then there's this concept of rooting dogmas, things that you absolutely have to believe if you want to be one of us. And being one of us is also a centrally important drive in every religion, because how do you define yourself if you don't have any standards of definition? Is the problem that every organized faith faces. And Islam went through this incredible 600-year burgeoning of exploration, and then suddenly people got afraid of the things that they were starting to consider. One of the most prominent Muslim scholars of the end of the Golden Age was actually one of the most important Muslim scholars of the Golden Age. His name was Al-Ghazali, and he was a hyper-brilliant polymath, but he's also a good example of why things fall apart, because he wrote a book called The Incoherence of the Philosophers, where he basically said, okay, if you believe this, this, or this, you can't be Muslim anymore. One of the things he said you can't believe is in causality, the fact that things happen because other things happen, because this whole concept of perfection, right? God must have a perfect path that each of us is walking on. Obviously, there's only one universe from Ghazali's perspective, and therefore causality can't exist.
Right.
So he actually argued against that entire thing, whereas it's like you mentioned my third book that I'm working on right now, Different Together Forever. I look at the whole concept of quantum mechanics and I say, well, you know what, quantum mechanics, we live in 10 or 11 dimensional space-time. There's an Iranian physicist who said that there's probably 12 dimensions. And the fact that we live in this 11 plus or minus dimensional space-time continuum actually means that when God set causality in motion and the first act causes all other acts to happen, all other acts is the active phrase there, that instead of just one line of causality, in fact, every possible line of causality is empowered by 11-dimensional space-time. So it's like we live in this multiverse that is so much more vast and so much more inclusive than we can even conceive. But the thing is, God conceived of it. And God conceived of this place where we can all find our path and we can all find our perfect path. And then there's this incredible place called heaven where all of the versions of you and I, because of this incredible principle of quantum entanglement, if you factor that back, every one of us is going to be myriad and legion, and every path we've explored will become part of our most perfect self, and we'll be the ones who know what the best choices were, and we'll be able to glory in the perfection that we ourselves are able to achieve in that incredible compilation. So it's just, that's the thing about intellectual and theological rational thought when you bring them together. Theology sort of says we have to figure this out. Rational thought says we'll never be able to figure anything out, and so it's frightening. But faith says God's figured this all out. We just need to live our best lives and be our most joyful selves and explore the universe. And it's an incredible reality that we live in that we're supposed to just be exploring.
Right. That's yeah. And so what I hear you saying there is that Islam and all religions really are compatible with the mystery and with not knowing. And in fact, there's a very good American author named Anne Lamott who says the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. And so it's that certainty. It's that certainty that we think that we want, that we crave, and that we hold on to religion to provide, and that's not what religion is for.
No.
It's called faith because it's faith. You cannot be certain about it, and when we try to be certain about it, then we get ourselves into all these troubles. Yeah,
and that's the overwhelming thing that all of our religions say.
Yeah,
that it is good, and God makes it good.
Yeah. That is, well, thank you for that. That was a great conversation. I wondered, before we let you go on this particular topic, I wonder if you could just give us a couple of examples of some of the wonderful things that Muslim scientists have given our world, just kind of things that we might not really realize about, or advancements in various areas.
Well, medicine is my area of particular interest. And for instance, there's this fellow called Ibn Sina, who was one of the original Muslim doctors. In fact, he wrote the textbook of Western medicine, the canon of Western medicine, for 600 years. It was the textbook of medicine in the West. He was they anglicized his name and they called him Avicenna instead of Ibn Sina, but he actually created Western medicine. And from an anesthesiology perspective, because I'm an anesthesiologist, Muslim doctors were the first doctors who performed what should be considered a modern cesarean section. Back in the original days of Caesar, the mother didn't ever survive a cesarean section because the mother was actually not considered to be a person. The mother was considered to be the vessel of the baby within. They would cut open the mother. The mother would die. The baby would be the reason why they did a cesarean section. The first actual successful modern cesarean section where both the mother and the baby survived because of anesthesia, because they gave the woman wine and opium and cannabis, and they actually gave her a true anesthetic. They put her to sleep. They did the operation. They sewed her back up afterwards. Mummy and baby both survived. That was actually performed in the 9th century in what is now Iran. They actually invented modern anesthesia and surgery over a century before we realized modern anesthesia and surgery in the West. And they wrote the textbook of medicine and surgery, but because of politics, we didn't even let the man Ibn Sina keep his own name.
Right. That is an outstanding example. Thank you. Dr. Liebert, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
If you would like to contact Dr. David Liebert, please reach out to me at kirkdunn.com, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with him. This has been an episode of the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. We'd like to thank the Ontario Arts Council for their support of this conversation series and their funding of Stitch Glass, and the Toronto Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts for their support of the Knitting Pilgrim Show. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this about interfaith matters, stitched glass, and knitting, please check out our episodes at kirkdunn.com or the Knitting Pilgrim YouTube channel.